Okay, we're starting to maybe a couple minutes early. I hope that this works out all right. I hope my lips are syncing right. It doesn't look like it. And I hope this is going out on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure. I guess I could probably try and check, but that should be hopefully on the main page. Uh, so let's see what they're doing here. Is it happening? Is it happening? I don't know. I don't know how to work this stuff. This is all new to me. So anyway, this is Doug, Voluntaryist, and I am coming to you live because I didn't get my video uploaded uh, in time. I thought I would have enough time, and it turns out I kind of didn't. So let's see what this thing is going to do here. I don't see anything yet. Oh, don't hose my laptop. That would be a bad thing. Yeah, live now. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, I see it. I think that's good. All right. Sorry for all the ums and the ohs and the boring stuff. All right. So let's get down to brass tacks, as I like to say. This is, once again, Doug, Voluntaryist. This is my show, The Drive-By Commentary. And I'm not driving, clearly. It's just a leftover. I may change the name of the show at some point. Who knows? Just for right now, it's fun. And I'm going to talk about a couple things here. We're going to fill half hour's time. Like I said earlier, I kind of goofed. I had a video prepared, but I didn't upload it in time. So you have to give yourself a lot more time before uploading to YouTube, apparently. I guess half an hour isn't enough time, I guess, because it has to not only upload, but it transcode and then put any watermarking on or whatever it does. Like, we have a little voluntary virtues icon that shows up there. It's kind of neat. So once again, thanks to Michael for, notice I never say his last name because I'm always afraid I'm going to butcher it. But thanks for having me on the show here and being a part of the network. This is exciting stuff. We're here to talk about all things voluntary. So let's get started. I shared an interesting link on Facebook today. It's about it was just a static camera shot of an intersection. It was completely, and I can't really show it to you on this live thing. I probably could paste a URL in, but it's a live feed of an unprotected intersection, a big intersection. They didn't put any stop signs in. There's no traffic signals, and I guess the local laws say nothing about having to stop in front of an unprotected turn. So the interesting thing is the traffic is continuously flowing. Now they sped the video up a little bit so you can see the flow, you can see the patterns. But the cars coming into the intersection that wanted to turn right just kept turning right, just kept going. Steady stream, never stopping, never being interrupted. The people wanting to turn left were the ones that kind of had to negotiate. But as these traffic streams would meet each other, people would slow down, negotiate. Oh, you go there? Okay, wait, I'll wait. Okay, these guys will go by. Okay, now I'll go. And then like pedestrians are just walking in the middle of this. It looks like a chaotic mess. But as you watch it, you see the patterns emerging. They're all individual patterns at the individual level. And there's no accidents. There's no traffic jams, right? The traffic is free flowing and it's safe. In fact, a lot safer than the big intersections that we have in America. I can think in a town locally here in Sacramento, they've got huge, gigantic intersections, 3-lane roads meeting each other, and massive signals set up, and big. A lot of them are red light cameras with big warnings about you better head obey the law, we're going to kick your ass. And so, of course, the problem with signals is when you have a green light, people just turn their minds off and barrel on through. I have the right of way. Just the very notion of right of way is what causes a lot of road rage, according to the psychologists in Europe, at any rate. And this encourages people to turn their minds off. And of course, a signal is no guarantee that a car will stop. A red light is no guarantee that a car will stop. You have to be awake and paying attention. And sometimes people burn these red lights, and it causes catastrophe. Well, we want to jump. We want to immediately put the blame on the guy that broke the rules. Bad guy. He's at fault. He's at fault. But what we should do is take a step back and say, wait a minute, are the rules at fault? Maybe the rules are causing the roads to be more dangerous than they need to be. Maybe the roads would be a lot safer if we didn't have these sets of rules. Maybe no rules is the answer. This is something that most Americans I know instantly reject. Oh, it would just be chaos. It would be a bloodbath out there because we're raised with the notion that more rules imposed by the authorities in charge are what make roads safe. And the studies that are coming out and the facts are contradicting this statist authoritarian narrative, that our roads would be actually far safer and actually far more free-flowing if we didn't have all of these rules, which I think is pretty ironic. Oh, by the way, if you're watching right now live, you can, I believe you can just jump in and comment, and I should be able to see it, hopefully. I didn't invite anyone, but I don't think you have to on a public chat. So the interesting thing is, one of my friends said, well, I was driving through a couple of intersections where the power went out and the traffic lights were out, and he says it took him, what would normally take him 10 minutes took him like a half an hour to try to negotiate and get through. And I said, well, you're forgetting something, that the problem is that the rules are still there. All right, the default rules. What do you do as a driver, licensed driver in America, when the traffic signal is blinking or out? What do? You come to a stop, right? You stop, and then everyone's trying to do this round robin thing where you go, and of course this is a mess, right? What this spontaneous system kind of showed, and also the intersection wasn't square, it was round, so you could easily turn right and not even get in the middle of this. What it showed was there were no lane markers, nothing in this intersection. So there was nothing for people to bitch and moan about. You're on the wrong side. That doesn't matter. When you're approaching this intersection, you have to slow down. But you don't have to stop, and that's the whole point. I mean, you do, but very rarely. You can just see how things are how this give and take, this sort of dance is just going on, all spontaneous. So without all the laws that say you have to stop at the intersection, the traffic would flow a lot smoother. People would self-negotiate a little bit better, which almost seems to happen on the bigger intersections anyway, because you can't quite keep track of who's next. The idea of let's right to left, who can keep track of that? You got hundreds of cars around you, right? Well, then it comes down to the individual, and the individual, like a neuron, will react to stimulus. And it's interesting how this sort of thing flows. And it's a study of chaos. The mathematicians that discovered chaos theory they basically say that order comes out of seeming chaos. Okay, so hope your day is going well. Hope everything's fine out there. Hope you don't have too many statists beating you over the head, saying we have to have violence. We have to. Otherwise, people won't be good to each other if we're not mean. Well, okay, so speaking of good and mean and violence and these sorts of things, I want to talk a bit about white privilege. I know this is a incendiary phrase in the voluntarist community. The so-called brutalists get offended by this, and I don't like the phrase either. I think white privilege carries too much blame and guilt in there, as if you should feel guilty for not being harassed as much as someone else, right? That doesn't make sense. So anyway, we'll talk a bit about this, though. There was an article I read where a black man was in a car that looked a lot like a limo. I mean, it was a fancy car, and he dropped off his wife, who happened to have lighter skin, so she looked like she was white. The police arrested him and hassled him and said, "Where's your license? You're a taxi cab driver and you're unlicensed, and so you have to go to jail and pay all these fines." And the guy's just like, "This is my wife." They didn't believe him. I think they impounded his car and they took him away. I mean, they just treated him like garbage, right? and he hadn't done anything wrong, even according to their stupid taxi rules, right? So this is an example of, had that been a white guy, and this is what the white privilege people are talking about, is that if this guy had been white, the police wouldn't have bothered him. And this is a real problem, and I think the only good thing I can see coming out of the whole white privilege thing is that awareness is being raised, and we're seeing it for kind of how it is. When you're white, and when you're white male, you don't see a lot of this discrimination going on, and it's institutionalized discrimination. The ironic thing is the progressives that say white privilege, right? They're arguing against government, and they don't even know it. And this is I point out to my liberal friends, I could just see them turn off. They just shut off and not listening. It's like this is a problem that is being caused, the lion's share, by government. Yeah, there's private coercion going on. There's private discrimination going on. Absolutely, that happens. And it's probably pretty bad. I know that's probably why they turn to the government. We have to make somebody stop it, right? But force isn't going to work for this. It's a bad idea, always has been a bad idea. So let's abandon it. Let's stop talking like we have to use force against people for having an opinion. That's wrong. And I know that sounds brutalist of me, but we shouldn't be arresting people because they have an opinion we don't like. What we should be doing is we should be using market and social ostracism forces to ostracize the people who are acting this way, who are treating people like this. Well, look, in a free society, there would be no career tax-funded cops, right? So if you have a security company, and also no public roads, they'd all be private. So if you had a security company who was harassing a guy because he was black, well, you as one of the co-owners of the road that you use, or paying customer, can boycott them. You can at least vote with your money. You can write a strongly worded letter to the president of the company. And these things actually work, believe it or not. Even in the biggest companies, it works. It's their bottom line. And when you start pulling your business away, they don't like it, and they start changing their tune. They start cleaning up their act. And I know this is not a message that the progressive wants to hear. The progressive wants to hear that you have to come in with violence. Well, let's get rid of, well, I will agree with one thing. Why don't we, instead of coming in with violence, let's get rid of the violence. Let's get rid of the violence of taxation, because taxation is violent. Taxation is imposing your will as the government over people and forcing them to pay for things that they might not want. So these cops that were harassing this black man were doing it on tax money that was taken by the taxpayer, from the taxpayer, by violent force. Right? And you say, oh, that wasn't violent. The threats are there. Pay taxes or go to jail. That's what it says. So the way to heal this is to first start going after the institutions in our society that are founded on coercion. This is where the progressive doesn't want to go. Progressive and left liberal seems they want control of the government so that they can impose their will on others, so that they can remake society. It's interesting, I was listening to a lecture by Tom Woods. He was talking about his politically incorrect guide to American history, and he was comparing and contrasting, kind of, even though it's incredibly flawed, as Lysander Spooner pointed out, the Constitution and kind of just why the federal government was founded the way that it was in stark contrast to what was going on in Europe. In France, the people that created these laws thought that they could reinvent human nature. It's very utopian of them. Through violence, through force of the state, we can change the way people are. We can recreate human nature. And the Americans were a lot more common sense about it, and that's why the Constitution says federal government remains small, because we don't want that. We don't want somebody coming in and trying to remake human beings, right? We just want to have something where we can keep bad actors in line and these sorts of things, because it doesn't work, right? We all know that government doesn't work for those ends, but they were a lot more no nonsense back then. Now that America, within the last 100 years, has become incredibly progressive, we've brought in this utopic thinking, and our school system raises children to believe this kinds of stuff, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And so this is where we need to act as a counterweight, the voluntarists, the freedom lovers. We have to act as a counterweight to these things. Unfortunately, it starts arguments, and sometimes you lose friends over it. I know I've lost some Facebook friends over it, but you have to. I mean, don't be an asshole about it. I disagree with Cantwell on this one. Sorry, Christopher, but I think you're wrong. Don't be an asshole, because when you're an asshole, no one wants to talk to you, except people that think like you do already. We want to reach the other people. We want to reach the people that are the mainstream. We have to break these ideas down. So when you talk to them, sometimes you got to use their language. White privilege, as ugly as that phrase is, I don't like it very much, but I understand what it is they mean. And if we're going to combat it, we've got to strike at the root. And the root of this sort of white privilege is it's institutionalized in the law, in the government, right? So let's attack that. Maybe we don't need government. How about that? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. So I don't know exactly what the solution is outside of let's look at the government. How can we get rid of the government? How can we bring it down? How can we get people to stop thinking that it's legitimate? Well, I mean, Larkin Rose says it's the problem is the belief in authority. Right? So we have to beat down the belief in authority, get rid of that. And maybe we can actually leave government behind once and for all. Who knows? I don't know if we'll ever see this in our lifetime. I have no idea. But the truth is the truth. Right? I mean, I have a friend of mine who just kind of recently converted, if you will, over to voluntarism. I mean, he was a minarchist for a long time, conservative kind of, but still libertarian. And when I first met him, it was on the Government is Bad page, if you've ever gone there. And he and I went round and round and round and round and round and round. And he kept calling my ideas utopian, and they won't work because government's inevitable and all these other things. I mean, he's just a very bleak view of the world, right? And it's easy to see why you would think that because, well, we always do have governments, don't we? So it's easy to come to the conclusion that, well, I guess we always will. Yeah, I think there's the is odd in there somewhere. So we don't necessarily have to have this in the future, right? Just like slavery isn't a foregone conclusion. We didn't. In the 19th century, 18th century, 17th century, the abolitionists maybe could easily lose hope, right? Could easily say, man, we're never going to get rid of slavery. It's just so entrenched. But they persevered. They kept at it. They said, no, that's wrong. So even if we could never, even if we get rid of government and a government comes back, right? That is no reason to not stop government. There's no reason to not say we don't want government. There's no reason to not work toward that end. That's like saying, well, we've got a criminal gang running our inner city. We need to get rid of the criminal gang. Well, once we get rid of the criminal gang, there'll just be another one. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't work to the ends of getting rid of the criminal gang, taking away their power. Remember that I said before, the power is never taken, it's only ever given. We have to recognize that this is critical, that this is important. We have to recognize that it's the people that give power to government. It's not the other way around. Once the people withdraw their support, government will collapse under its own weight. The whole authoritarian structure relies on belief in authority. And that's what we need to get rid of. And I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know what the right approach is. All I know is we need to get the message out there. So keep at it. So let's see. Okay. Another drink of water. The whistle gets dry. So it's so nice to see you. I'm so glad you came on by. I mean, what about those gas prices? Sorry. Okay. Okay, so Bitcoin as disruptive technology. I think that we are on a precipice now financially, where obviously we all know the shit's going to hit the fan, as they say. We all know that the current financial situation of the United States, there's the sovereign debt and the funny money and the whole banking system is just going to collapse at some point. We're all just waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're waiting for that currency crisis to finally be upon us. We know it's going to happen. We just don't know when. The nice thing is Bitcoin. This is the perfect time for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is now poised to make an end run completely around the banking system once people realize, and I mean in the mainstream, just what it's all about. I mean, we kind of got a clue, we got a glimpse of this during the Cyprus Bank fiasco, when the government declared a banking holiday and everyone had their assets frozen. Bitcoin, that's when Bitcoin first went crazy. That's when the price went through the roof, at least what we were used to seeing. We were used to seeing prices of like $10 per Bitcoin and 12, and all of a sudden it shot past 100. Everyone thought this is an enormous bubble, this will never be sustained, and it came back down. And then it went through the freaking moon, right? All the way up to 1,000. Now it's come back. It dipped. Now it's flirting around $500-600. It's just, I think that the value in Bitcoin, and even the gold bugs, I don't agree with them on this one. They say gold is the only money because it's got value. Well, yes, I realize that you can use gold for things other than money, right? But Bitcoin also has value. I mean, the very technology is something you can use for things other than money. So, for example, a messaging system can be built on it, and there's one. It's called, I think, PY Message, I think. And I've used it a few times. It's written in Python, but it's based on the Bitcoin architecture. And you send completely secure and encrypted messages, all decentralized, no central server, right? MadeSafe, if you've looked at MadeSafe, go to madesafe.com. You'll see this is an architecture they're building, and it's a framework that's built along the lines of Bitcoin in the same kind of concept. The idea you have a public database and it's checked, everything's encrypted, all transactions are encrypted, they're end-to-end encrypted. So when you want to make a transaction, you sign it with the person's key that you want to target, and then send it away, right? This is the wave of the future, and Bitcoin has ushered in this thinking for a completely decentralized world. When the banking system collapses, the government loses a lot of its control, because when people stop using the US dollar as their currency, they lose the ability to inflate. And remember, they have been inflating the currency for the last 100 years. Okay, you can look where the dollar has lost, what, 98% of its value. They have been diluting the crap out of the dollar. And it's just this Keynesianism, this the theory that you can stimulate the market, and how money is just something that isn't subject to supply and demand and these sorts of things. And that entire concept, the paradox of thrift. You can't save your money, because when you save your money, then the money's not in circulation. People are not spending it. You're not helping the economy. It's actually going to collapse because you saved, even though you're saving for future investment. And that's the Keynesian theory, which of course I think Hazlitt does a good job completely debunking. And that's the government we live under is founded on those principles. And so that's why we see so much inflation, because they really do believe they can keep the consumption up by inflating and inflating. I mean, you get away with that for a little while, but for the long term, no. Peter Schiff has a great analogy to hard drug use. If somebody is ailing from an overdose of, or near overdose of heroin, the solution isn't more heroin. The solution is to get them off the drug. But they keep thinking, well, we'll just give them another fix, give them another fix, give them another fix. And of course, the dosage has to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you eventually die. And that's kind of what's going to happen with the U.S. economy. We're heading in that direction. The final dose will be injected into the veins of the economy, if you will. And at some point, it's going to collapse. Happened in 2008. We got one. The next big one is going to be currency. And I don't think there's much the Fed can do about that. So Bitcoin says, end run around that entire system. And that's why I'm so excited about Bitcoin. Okay, so it looks like I got less than 10 minutes. We got eight minutes to go here according to this clock. And So somebody mentioned to me about economics. I saw a post a while ago about jobs being exported overseas, and he said, well, you know, it's wrong that we're sending the jobs over there. Economically, this is going to be bad for the economy, and so companies shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I said, you have to understand something, that the economy works on a series of signals, and prices are a signal. And the fact that labor prices are being held artificially too high in this country through labor laws and these other things mean that companies are going to say, right, let's go find cheaper labor somewhere else. And probably not just the labor, but the overall regulatory structure of where you are costs you a lot more money to comply with. Just the fact of hiring somebody, for example, there's so many things that you have to do as an employer. Makes it hard for small businesses to stay in business, and it gives a strong incentive for the large companies to eventually pick up and move to a locale with cheaper labor. The problem with this thinking, and this is why I think it's so narrow-minded, is that the progressives and the liberals say we have to stop that. Heck, I even know conservatives that say that. Oh, we have to stop the export of jobs. They're American jobs. They belong to America, right? They appeal to nationalism and patriotism. The thing is you're not going to stem the flow by doing that. You have to go after the root cause. The root cause, what we were just talking about a little earlier, what I was just talking about, inflation. And because of the Federal Reserve has such ridiculous inflation policies, basically the cost of living just keeps going up and up and up. And this puts pressure on people who I can't just get this job because I can't afford to live. And this is what's causing unemployment. There's a million reasons why we don't want to do this. And we need falling prices. We need deflation. We need the deflation of price, not necessarily deflation of currency. But I would say we need to, the federal government, the right thing to do would be stop the inflation, right? Completely just stop it. Let interest rates go through the roof. And let prices begin to collapse, because that's exactly what they want to do, and that's easier for the poor. That will never happen. They're never going to do that, because if they don't stop, if they don't keep doing this and keep borrowing, eventually the interest is going to bankrupt the nation. And at some point, the U.S. is going to have to default. So if we want to fix the job problem, why don't we look at the Fed's horrendous monetary policies? Again, in a free society, we don't have an imposed central bank. We just don't have it. There is none. There is no government currency that you're forced to use. You use whatever currency you want, and there will be free market currencies. Bitcoin is such a currency. There are other altcoins. What do I mean by altcoin? I mean cryptocurrencies. There's like 100 of them or something. It's crazy how many other. There's even a Maza coin, which is a coin used in the Lakota Nation in America. It's an Indian reservation. So I got about 3 minutes. So basically, if we want to fix that problem, let's attack the root. So let's talk about gun control and 3D printing. The idea that, well, actually, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go to the next one. Taking guns away requires violence. Sylvester Stallone just came out against guns, and it's like, we have to take them all away. This is ridiculous. People have guns. And he literally said, we have to go door to door and take them away. And the problem is that what he ignores is the irony of that statement, that you have to use violence and guns to take guns away. I think there's something kind of wrong with that. And the liberal and the leftist and the progressive will scream and yell and say it's not violent. Yes, it's violent. It's very violent, because it's done under threats of violence. And that's what the law does. You pass a law, under every law is a gun. So the irony that you want to take guns away by using violence, something's wrong with that. You can't make guns go away because you outlawed them. It is the dumbest thing ever. Sorry. So last bit, we'll talk a little bit about decentralized law and order, since And as a nice bookend to what we started with, the spontaneous ordering of traffic, law and order needs to also be spontaneously ordered. And that's how you get order in society. You don't get order in society by imposing it over the barrel of a gun from central rule. You get order in society by decentralizing this authoritarianism, by allowing people to interoperate with each other and interact with each other on a voluntary basis. And that's how we get there. So decentralized law and order, if you're interested, I recommend that you look into, there's a good book called Anarchy in the Law that I'm reading. It's by Edward Stringham, and I mentioned it in my last podcast. If you want to learn more about that, if you're on the fence, you're like, I don't think this is going to work. How the hell can this, this doesn't make any sense. You have to have a, one-stop shopping of a court, right? You have to have somebody have the final word, right? No, it's exactly what you don't want. And society, there have been many societies that have prospered very well on spontaneous, decentralized law, what they call polycentric law. And one worthy of note is medieval Ireland. Check them out. It's called the Law of the Brain. Okay, it looks like I am out of time. This is once again Doug Voluntaryist, the drive-by or the standby commentary, as it were. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Take care now.